You stole that drink, Kim Taehyung. Jungkook's accusation echoed through the deserted beverage store, shattering the night's stillness. His eyes narrowed, casting an unforgiving accusation upon Taehyung's rigid figure. Taehyung, his face ashen, met Jungkook's gaze with an unreadable expression, a mix of bewilderment, sorrow, and something else that sent a shiver down Jungkook's spine. Jungkook, a young man with a fiery spirit and a strong sense of justice, never imagined he'd find himself in this situation. His own best friend, Kim Taehyung, accused of theft. Their lifelong bond was now being tested by this agonizing accusation. "I didn't steal anything, Jungkook." Taehyung's voice was barely a whisper. Yet, Jungkook remained unconvinced. The evidence before him was too compelling to dismiss. An expensive bottle of liquor was tucked beneath Taehyung's jacket, and CCTV footage showed him taking it from the shelf. "Then what's this?" Jungkook held up the bottle, his eyes demanding answers. Taehyung fell silent, his head bowed. His shoulders trembled, and Jungkook saw a tear fall to the floor. Jungkook's heart sank. He knew Taehyung wasn't a thief. Taehyung was honest, kind, and always there for him. So why? Why would Taehyung do this? "Tell me, Taehyung," Jungkook's voice softened. "Why did you do this?" Taehyung lifted his gaze, his eyes glistening. I had a reason." "What reason?" Jungkook pressed. "What reason could make you steal?" Taehyung hesitated, then took a deep breath and began to explain. His story shocked Jungkook, brought tears to his eyes, and made him question everything he thought he knew about his friend. It turned out Taehyung's little sister, Hannah, suffered from a rare illness requiring exorbitant medical expenses. Taehyung's family was penniless, and he was desperate. He stole the drink to sell it, hoping to raise money for Hannah's treatment. "I know it was wrong," Taehyung sobbed, "but I had no other choice. I love Hannah dearly, and I couldn't let her die." Jungkook was speechless, tears streaming down his face. He felt guilty for accusing Taehyung, yet he understood his desperation. "I'll help you, Taehyung," Jungkook finally said. "We'll find a way to get the money for Hannah's treatment." Taehyung's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yes," Jungkook nodded. "We'll do this together." They embraced, their tears a mix of relief and hope. Their friendship had been tested, but their bond remained unbroken. However, Jungkook knew this was just the beginning. They still had to find the money, and they had to do it quickly. Time was running out, and Hannah's life was at stake. The cold, metallic tang of the beverage store lingered in Jungkook's nostrils, a stark reminder of the previous night's confrontation. Leaving the store, Jungkook and Taehyung walked in a strained silence, the weight of their shared secret pressing down on them. The city lights blurred around them, each flicker a question mark hanging in the air. Jungkook, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, finally broke the silence. "We need a plan, Taehyung. We can't just hope money falls from the sky." Taehyung, his face drawn and weary, nodded. "I know. I've been trying to think of something, anything, but every avenue seems blocked." They found themselves in a small, dimly lit cafe, the aroma of strong coffee a stark contrast to the sterile scent of the store. Jungkook watched Taehyung's hands tremble as he held his cup, a reflection of the inner turmoil he was battling. "What about your parents?" Jungkook asked, his voice gentle. "Surely, they must have some resources." Taehyung's laughter was hollow, devoid of mirth. "Resources? We've sold everything of value. Our house, my mother's jewelry, even my father's old car. Everything went towards Hannah's initial treatments. Now, we're left with nothing." A heavy silence descended upon them. Jungkook felt a surge of helplessness, a knot tightening in his stomach. He knew how much Taehyung loved his family, especially Hannah. The thought of her suffering, of Taehyung's desperation, was unbearable. "There has to be another way," Jungkook muttered, more to himself than to Taehyung. Suddenly, Taehyung's eyes lit up, a flicker of something akin to hope igniting within them. "There is something, a friend of mine, he mentioned a high-stakes poker game. He said the winnings could be substantial." Jungkook's heart sank. "Poker? High stakes? It sounded risky, dangerous." "Taehyung, are you sure? That sounds reckless." "It's our only chance, Jungkook," Taehyung said, his voice firm. "I know it's a gamble, but Hannah's life is worth any risk." Jungkook hesitated. He knew Taehyung was desperate, but the idea of gambling with such high stakes made him uneasy. He had always been the cautious one, the voice of reason, but he also knew he couldn't abandon Taehyung. "Okay," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "but we do this together. No more secrets." The poker game was held in a clandestine basement, the air thick with smoke and tension. The players were a motley crew, their faces etched with greed and desperation. Jungkook, his heart pounding in his chest, watched as Taehyung played, his face a mask of concentration. The stakes were high, the tension palpable. Taehyung's luck seemed to fluctuate wildly. One moment, he was winning big, the next, he was losing everything. Jungkook watched, his knuckles white, as the pile of chips grew and dwindled. The game was a roller coaster, a dizzying dance between hope and despair. As the hours wore on, the tension in the room grew thicker. Jungkook could feel the weight of every lost bet, every close call. He saw the desperation in Taehyung's eyes, the silent prayer for a miracle. Then, just as the night seemed to stretch into an endless abyss, Taehyung's luck turned. He won a series of hands, his pile of chips growing exponentially. The room buzzed with a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. Jungkook felt a surge of relief, a wave of hope washing over him. But the relief was short-lived. As Taehyung was nearing the final hand, a man with cold, calculating eyes stepped forward. "You're cheating," the man accused, his voice low and menacing. The room fell silent. Taehyung's face paled. "I'm not cheating," he said, his voice trembling. "Prove it," the man sneered, his eyes narrowing. "Or you'll pay the price." The man, a known figure in the city's underworld, revealed a gun. Jungkook's breath caught in his throat. The room held its breath. Taehyung's eyes were wide with fear, but they held a steely resolve. "I won fair and square," Taehyung said, his voice surprisingly steady. The man raised the gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You're going to regret this." Before the man could fire, the lights in the basement flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. A scuffle broke out, the sounds of fighting echoing through the darkness. Jungkook, his heart pounding, tried to find Taehyung in the chaos. When the lights flickered back on, the man was gone. But so was Taehyung. The flickering lights cast long, distorted shadows across the basement, painting a macabre tableau of the chaos that had just unfolded. Jungkook's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, eerie silence. The acrid scent of gunpowder mingled with the stale smoke, a grim reminder of the near-deadly confrontation. He scanned the room, his eyes darting from face to face, searching for any sign of Taehyung. But he was gone, vanished into the darkness as if swallowed by the shadows themselves. A cold dread settled over Jungkook. He knew the man with the gun was no ordinary gambler. He was a predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he had taken Taehyung. The realization hit him like a physical blow, leaving him breathless. He had let Taehyung down, allowed him to walk into a trap. He stumbled out of the basement, the cool night air a stark contrast to the stifling heat within. The city lights, once a comforting glow, now seemed to mock him, each flicker a reminder of his failure. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed Taehyung's number. No answer. He tried again and again, but only the cold, mechanical voice of the operator echoed back. Panic clawed at his throat. He had to find Taehyung, but where? He had no idea where the man had taken him, no clue about his motives. He was lost in a labyrinth of uncertainty, with only his fear to guide him. He remembered Taehyung's friend, the one who had mentioned the poker game. Maybe he knew something. He raced to the address Taehyung had given him, a rundown apartment building on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the silence broken only by the distant wail of sirens. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. A young man with weary eyes and a nervous demeanor answered. Jungkook, his voice tight with urgency, explained the situation. The man's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. That's Jae-sung, the man stammered. He's not someone you want to mess with. He runs a tight ship, and he doesn't like losing. Where did he take Taehyung? Jungkook demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. The man hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. I don't know. He has a place, an old warehouse by the docks. But it's dangerous. You shouldn't go there. Jungkook ignored the warning. He had no choice. He had to find Taehyung, no matter the risk. He thanked the man and raced towards the docks, the city's underbelly stretching out before him like a dark, menacing maw. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a hulking silhouette against the night sky. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay, the silence broken only by the lapping of waves against the pier. He approached cautiously, his senses heightened, his heart pounding in his ears. He found a gap in the rusted metal wall and slipped inside. The interior was dark and cavernous, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete and rotting wood. He moved silently, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. He heard a muffled sound, a faint cry. He followed the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. He found Taehyung bound and gagged, his face bruised and bloody. Jae-sung stood over him, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Well, look who decided to join the party, Jae-sung sneered. I was wondering when you'd show up. Jungkook's blood boiled. He lunged at Jae-sung, his fist connecting with his jaw. Jae-sung stumbled back, his eyes flashing with rage. A brutal fight ensued, the sounds of punches and grunts echoing through the warehouse. Jungkook fought with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed, fueled by anger and desperation. But Jae-sung was stronger, more experienced. He landed a vicious blow, sending Jungkook crashing to the floor. As Jungkook struggled to rise, Jae-sung pulled out his gun, his eyes cold and menacing. This is for interfering, he hissed. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the young man from the apartment, his face pale but determined. He held a metal pipe, and with a desperate cry, he swung it at Jae-sung. The blow connected, sending Jae-sung reeling. In the chaos, Jungkook managed to free Taehyung. They fled the warehouse, the sounds of Jae-sung's enraged cries echoing behind them. The cold night air nipped at their exposed skin as they ran, their footsteps echoing through the deserted docks. Jungkook, his chest heaving, glanced back. The looming silhouette of the warehouse faded into the darkness, but the threat it represented remained vivid in his mind. They had escaped, but they were far from safe. Jae-sung's anger was a dark cloud hanging over them, promising a storm of retribution. They found refuge in a dilapidated motel on the outskirts of the city, a place where the shadows seemed to stretch into eternity. The flickering neon sign cast an eerie glow over the peeling paint and cracked windows, a stark contrast to the warmth they desperately sought. Inside the motel room, the air was thick with the scent of stale cigarettes and cheap disinfectant. Taehyung, his face bruised and swollen, sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Thank you, Jungkook," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You saved my life." Jungkook, his own body aching from the fight, nodded. "We saved each other. We're in this together." The young man from the apartment, whose name was Seekjin, sat quietly in the corner, his gaze fixed on the floor. He had risked everything to help them, and Jungkook felt a surge of gratitude. "Why did you come back, Seekjin?" Jungkook asked, his voice gentle. "You could have stayed away." Seekjin looked up, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. "I couldn't leave you two alone with him. Jae-sung, he's a monster. I've seen what he can do." A heavy silence settled over the room, the unspoken fear hanging in the air. They were trapped, hunted, with no idea where to turn. The money they needed for Hannah's treatment seemed further away than ever. "We need a plan," Jungkook said, breaking the silence. "We can't stay here forever." Taehyung nodded, his eyes filled with a desperate resolve. "We need to get Hannah the treatment she needs. We can't give up." Seekjin, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "I know someone who might be able to help. He's a doctor, a good one. He works outside the system, but he's saved a lot of lives." Jungkook, and Taehyung exchanged glances. A doctor outside the system? It sounded risky, but they were running out of options. Where can we find him? Jungkook asked. Seokjin hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. He's hard to find. He moves around a lot, but I can try to contact him. The next few hours were a blur of nervous waiting. Seokjin made a series of cryptic phone calls, his voice low and urgent. The tension in the room was palpable, each passing minute stretching into an eternity. Finally, Seokjin hung up the phone, his face pale. He'll meet us, he said, his voice barely a whisper. But it's dangerous. He's being watched. They followed Seokjin's directions, weaving through the city's labyrinthine streets, their senses heightened, their hearts pounding in their chests. They arrived at a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place that seemed to exist outside the boundaries of civilization. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and something else, something vaguely medicinal. A man with tired eyes and a gentle demeanor stood waiting for them. He introduced himself as Dr. Min. Dr. Min examined Taehyung's wounds, his touch gentle and precise. He then turned to Jungkook, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. I can help Hannah, he said, his voice low and steady. But it will cost you. Jungkook and Taehyung exchanged glances. They had no money, no resources. We don't have much, Jungkook admitted, his voice filled with desperation. But we'll do anything. Dr. Min nodded, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. There's a job, he said. Dangerous, but it pays well. Are you willing? They looked at each other, the weight of their desperation settling over them. They had no other choice. The dim, flickering fluorescent lights of the warehouse cast long, distorted shadows, creating an unsettling atmosphere that mirrored the unease churning within Jungkook.